This week, this Sunday morning, we find ourselves in the Gospel of Matthew. Matthew, of course, is full of beautiful teachings and healings, miracle stories. If some of you might remember, in Matthew's Gospel, it's not long after he calls the first disciples that he has the Sermon on the Mount. We have the beautiful teachings about being the light of the world, about loving your enemies, giving to the needy, what prayer is about, do not judge others, all these beautiful, beautiful teachings. And then right after that, there's a series of healings that happen. And I was looking through this, just thinking about where we might turn our thoughts this Sunday morning. And I stopped at our chapter 9 for one reason. Our story about Jesus healing the blind and the mute, because I had written a little note to myself in the margin, and it was just 2 words, and it said, "My negativity." Now, in our story for this morning, when Jesus is healing the blind and the mute, I mean, this is amazing, amazing stuff. There's a crowd there that's watching, and they think it's pretty amazing as well. If you can even try to imagine, what would that be like to see Jesus casting out a demon? I mean, I don't even know what that would be like. And everyone is pretty amazed, except for who? Who decides to rain on this parade? Does anyone remember? The Pharisees. It's just a little line that pops up. We don't even hear that they have been there in the beginning. It just says, "But the Pharisees said, it is by the prince of demons that he drives out demons." So we have this beautiful, hope-filled story, and then all of a sudden we get this line in here of somebody who's just not seeing it for what it is, and is taking away some of that joy. And so I obviously made a little note to myself there. I just said my negativity, because all of a sudden it seems to pop up, and at times it can just take the joy away from seeing what is really there in front of us. As it turns out, of course, this is not the only time we hear about the Pharisees. They pop up here and there, and they're extremely critical of what's happening. They question what Jesus is doing. They question how he is doing it. And they are not quite open to what is the reality here. I was doing a little reading just to remind myself of who the Pharisees were, and I couldn't quite find out how they started as a group. But what I did read was that during the time of Jesus, and somewhere they would have formed as a group somewhere in those 4 centuries, sort of between the time of the last of the Old Testament and the beginning of the New Testament. And there were 3 different religious groups of Judaism, and we hear about them from time to time. There were the Pharisees, there were the Sadducees, and then there were the Essenes. And, I'm sure they started as Jerusalem was becoming more Greek, and sort of Hellenistic culture was infiltrating Jerusalem, and I'm sure they kind of arose as kind of a conservative voice, kind of calling people back to values. Their name, the Pharisees, means separatists, even. They're kind of separating themselves from the rest of the people, and it's interesting that that's the root of that word, and that's what it means, because in our teachings, some of you remember, whenever the Pharisees are a part of our story, it has to do with a separation having happened. And it's kind of that separation between our head and our heart. It's like having the truth, but maybe not loving it, So there's a separation. They pop up in this story, And in a way, they are very much taking away from what is happening here. So I wrote that. I've written that, my negativity. And negativity, I thought I'd just look it up. And the dictionary, the way I'm thinking of it, explains it as unpleasant, disagreeable, gloomy, pessimistic, unfavorable or detrimental, even hostile. And, you know, negativity, unfortunately, is so powerful at times. And I'm not sure if this is the same for you, but you can have 100 positive, 99 positive comments. And if there was one negative comment, one criticism, how much more strongly, at least in my mind, does that stand out and remain with me than all of those good things? Well, so I was thinking about this. What happens when we have a negative attitude about life? Or what is that? What does that do for us? I was sitting at my kitchen table thinking about this, and you know my view of the kitchen table, of course, is our bird feeder. Now you know about my problems with my squirrel and my bird feeder. Well, he was there as I was thinking about this, you know, really kind of down and gloomy. But he left. And then, so I'm thinking about this negativity. What is that in our life? How does that show up in our life? And all of a sudden, this is when the really cool thing happens, when nature kind of reflects where our thoughts are. All of a sudden, all these blackbirds descend on this bird feeder. And I haven't really had too many problems with the blackbird before. But all of a sudden, there's this huge swarm of them. They're so clustered around the feeder that you can't even hardly see the feeder. They're all over the ground. And it just felt like an image of like what dark thoughts feel like sometimes. You know, starlings, I think they were starlings. Did any of you see the article in the Hutch News about starlings? They were introduced in New York City. I think it said maybe 120 years ago or so. There were 50 pairs introduced to New York City. Today, there are over 200 million starlings across the United States, with 5 million flocking to Kansas during the winter each year. And if you see them, they move around in these groups, and it's so interesting to watch them, the way they move in a group, and they'll move here, and then they'll move over there. And for me, I was thinking, boy, when I'm down about something, my thoughts are negative over here, and then they jump over here, and they're pretty negative, and then they're over here, and they're pretty negative. And it felt like such an image, you know, their dark color, the way that they move together, the way that they have just grown and multiplied. And actually, they're very damaging. The birds damage crops, eat livestock feed, have potential human health and safety concerns such as salmonella, is what it said in the article. A study by the USDA in 2000 estimated that starlings cause roughly $800 million in damage a year. And in 1999, 3 Kansas feedlot operators reported a $600,000 loss from bird damage alone. These are extremely damaging. I mean, if you think about what an image that is, you know, and what kind of damage does our negative thoughts do for us, or how does it keep us? Now, I'm guessing that it's not just me, that in some form or another, all of us experience a kind of, call it what you will. I've been searching for the right words all week, you know, whether it's pessimistic, where it's kind of gloomy, just kind of down, the cup half empty kind of feeling, you know. We do struggle with those, I think. Is that right? Am I the only one? I'm just wondering, what do we do with that in our life? I talked to Adam about this. I said, what do you do? And he said, what took me a long time to realize that it's a choice. And I was just wondering, did any of you feel like that's, like it took a while to realize that it was a choice? Do you feel like you're still learning that it's a choice, that it takes a while, sometimes it doesn't cross your mind right away that, oh, I'm not being actually very uplifting at this moment. So negativity isn't good in that sense, but we also know we're given this whole wide range of emotions just as human beings. I guess what I was searching for is, what is the ideal way to approach life? I mean, is it realistic to be optimistic all the time, or is that not possible? What is the way to approach life? The meaning of life in our tradition is that we were created to become heavenly. You know, our whole goal is about becoming heavenly. But what is involved in that? And how do we face our days? You know, there's something to be said about, we can't be cheerful all the time. I mean, not when if you really think about some of the things people are facing in this world, it's just not possible. But is there a better word for it, or a different way of being? There's a quote I saw by written by Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He was a German minister. He was in Nazi prison during the war. And he said something to the extent that he said he was neither a pessimist nor an optimist, that he was living by hope. You know, I think hope maybe captures, in a sense, that we can have that optimism, and that we can acknowledge the suffering, and we can acknowledge that there is something more to strive for. So how do we live with hope? How do we raise ourselves up? You know, the Amalekites, that story, I love that story with Moses, because, of course, the Amalekites are those negative thoughts that get us, especially when we're tired. So we're doing battle with the Amalekites, and it said from generation to generation, the Amalekites were going to be doing battle, you know. And we're, there's that image, I love it, of lifting his, Moses can only have his own strength for so long, and then he's going to need help. So what I wanted to do just for a few moments is I wanted to ask, what is your recipe for lifting yourself back up? Or with God's help, of course. How do you come out of that negativity when we're feeling that way? Or when maybe we feel like we've lost hope? Is there anything that you do that helps you to be lifted back up?
Being outside.
Being outside, yes, I think. Just add the word nature there. Right, that's very powerful.
I bake.
Bake. I'm going to take a picture of this when we're all done. I'm going to put it on our website. Things to do to feel.
Come to church.
Come to church.
Well, I love that image of the starlings.
Yes.
If there's a dirtier bird anywhere, I don't know where to be. Dirty bird.
That's the phrase, isn't it?
But yeah, but you can get that swarm. And you're not asking for it. Sometimes it just descends. There they are. But in that group we're doing, that meditation, that thank you, Lord, I think that works. And it doesn't have to be for very long. It could sure help.
I might. So there's two parts of that, really. There's the meditation part, and also the gratitude.
It's hard to be glad for some things.
I like to sit down and play the piano, so you can put music down.
Music.
Getting hugs.
Yeah.
You gotta face the reason why you feel it.
Right. Right. That's really important.
It is.
Right. Being willing to acknowledge the feelings, and for some people that helps, like with journaling is one way of doing that. But acknowledging where you're at and why you're feeling like that.
And then what do you do about it?
Right.
Because that's action. Right?
And here's a tricky one.
Yes.
It always feels good to dump your stuff on someone else, but then you make them feel bad.
Right.
And if you do it a lot, then you just have another person just like you around.
Right. So it is important to be able to share, and you have to have the wisdom to know how to share, I guess.
And not all one person.
Right. Right.
Spread it around.
If you reach outside yourself to somebody else, you don't have to dump your stuff on them. You can get positive feedback from just visiting with a friend or thinking outside your own problems.
Or you can do something positive for someone.
Right.
Right.
Is that what you're...
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get.
Would service be a way, or not, but not so much what you were saying.
Well,
Just caring about another
yeah,
person.
thinking about somebody else rather than yourself.
Right.
Helps you maybe see that you're not, I don't know.
There's a bigger universe. There's a lot more happening than just
Yeah.
your world.
Right.
Right.
And that kind of leads to the other ones, that no matter how bad you feel and how horrible you feel like this, that there's always something that it could be worse. You know,
Right.
and you have to know the bad to know the good.
Yes.
Okay, in my mind, I'm going to be one of the Pharisees.
Okay.
Most of those are Band-Aids.
Band-Aids. Okay. Except for
Take a look at it.
taking a look at it. Right.
Because that'll come back. If you don't know why you do it or why you think that way, something else is going to make it happen. And you're always doing something else to get away from it. So if you believed in the beginning that the Pharisees, when they said that, it's whatever they said, if you really believe in Jesus, and Jesus is getting his stuff from his Father, it's God, right? Then God is all. Then he is the Prince of light and darkness. So that means that in everybody is light and darkness. So it's always going to happen. It's like on and off. You have to battle just like that. So don't say that the burr in the blanket's not supposed to be there. Because most of the stuff that occurs is for a reason. And then you have to deal why.
Right.
And how you do that takes care of life.
Well, what's the why of the hurricane and the massacre of those children and starvation and drought? What's the why?
Well, drought you can't blame on.
I'm not going to say what's the why of all these. These are the catastrophes that people are dealing with.
You can't correct them.
Well, then you're saying acknowledge them and
Yeah, you
figure
do.
out why
Yeah.
you feel bad about it and take action.
Well,
I mean, some things, very much you can do.
then why do you worry about it?
Well, you might be in pain, you might be cold, you might be starving.
Pain you can handle. But things
Yeah.
like I said, I don't want to get into a big discussion.
Well, you are in a discussion.
Just
Well, I
one of
think
these
there's a lot of truths, different truths being expressed. The truth is not everything, life isn't always, maybe isn't meant to be and isn't going to be perfect on earth. It's not. It's the struggles that help us to grow. We don't like it necessarily, but oftentimes the things that are hardest are the things that help us grow the most. In Genesis chapter 8, I believe it is, it talks about how there's light and dark, morning and evening. There's the seasons. That's part of our existence, and I think knowing that going into it is also helpful. As long as we keep having faith, keep loving, keep trying to do what we can, we will move back into that light at times when we are in darkness or not,
But at any time, did none of those things occur?
At any time do none of
Did the killings, did the weather, did the disease, did any of that never occur? I don't think so. So that's life.
That's life.
And
there.
We're just at a different point in time.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what we have to put up with.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to take care of ourselves. And if you're right, then at least around you, those things won't occur except for the natural occurrences that we have no control. But sometimes, the killings and that kind of thing, you may be able to do something about it. But on a grand scale, it always happens. And because we're so smart, we think we can stop it. I don't think so.
I think that's something to think about. I feel like there are some things we can help with, though. And that's part of our Christian life, is when we see there are places we can make a difference, then we do.
Right here with yourself. We put so much energy out there that we forget about right here. Because everything starts with me. And nobody has the patience for that, because it takes a lot of time.
I do think that the helpful part still here is that sometimes this may be what we could say it's a Band-Aid, but at the same time, I think there are times when we just need to get outside of ourselves. We just have to get out of whatever it is we keep listening to our inner thought about. Maybe I'm not good enough, I'm not, I can't make a difference, whatever it is. Sometimes there are ways like being outside that can change a person, their focus, or just make them think in a different way. There are things that we do that will change us in a way that I think can help us maybe think more about, well, why is it that I'm feeling this way? What can I do? I think some of these things can lead to that.
If you take it with you and get to a different space.
Right.
But if you completely forget about it.
Right.
It's like there's me, there's the house, the family, right? Then there's just outside the house. Then there's the government. Then there's the world. I mean, it goes like that. But nobody wants to start at the very beginning because they see so much has already happened, they have no control, which may be true. So I think we have to just take care of it right here and just hope for the best. And then hope's really not a strategy. It's doing, it's action.
Right. Well, I think we're all going to see it a little differently, and I think there's a lot of truth being said. I think maybe what's important is to remember that I guess just that God is in control, and hope for some of us is really important to remembering that God is in control.
In the very first part of Matthew, he says to pray, our Father, it's all about anonymity. Do it yourself. So that's the way he starts.
Well, I will just close with a quote, but I might say what I really like about that is it starts with our. There's something uniting about that, and we can do what we can to find ways of caring about all of us, and starting with our own life. I just want to say, I saw this quote this week. I get these quotes every day, it was said this is something Swedenborg had written in Heaven and Hell. The activity of love and faith is what makes heaven. The activity of love and faith. And I was just thinking about all of these ways as activity, things that we do to try and get to, maybe out of where is more negative, but to a more positive, heavenly place. The activity of love and faith is what makes heaven. Well, we will keep all of these thoughts in our minds. There's a lot. We know we could go on and on, I'm sure. Well, let us turn to the offertory here. Let us give of ourselves and our gifts as we make an offering.